David, welcome to Camera Conversations, optimized by Pure Sport. Are we ready?
I am. I like to take things unscripted. Let's just have a chat.
Yeah, some guests will ask me for a breakdown of what's come before, but when you and I met, I knew we would have a good chat pretty much regardless of where we ended up,
Yeah.
just because of the different things that we're both interested in that the audience are also interested in.
I think so as well. I think it's gonna be good.
One of the things that I wrote down was your ex bio says, I only care about getting Brits to invest more in shares. Why is that?
Because Brits are too static along the risk curve. There's various reasons for that. But if we look at there's two stats that I really like on this. So Brits absolutely love to shove money in cash ISAs, and I think this is really connected to our love of property. So the first thing people do is once they've got their property deposit, they're like, I don't want to lose that. Let me shove it in a cash ISA because I know that's safe. Now, it's not really safe, but I'll get onto that afterwards. Now, from 2013 till 2023, Brits have lost £500 billion in wealth from not being invested in shares, which amounts to, which is the second stat, 20% of GDP. So really this safe environment, which is definitely connected to the property market, is fueling a real lack of productivity and wealth generation. Whereas if we compare to Americans, it's completely different. You know, American GDP per capita is about, I think, nearly $90,000 now. Here it's much, much less.
And we've been overtaken by Republic of Ireland, Singapore, Australia.
Yeah.
For no other reason that, well, many reasons actually, but it's such a disappointing environment.
Yeah, I think so. With Ireland, it's a little bit different because basically all the US conglomerates, they have their EU base in Ireland, which
Excuse things.
skews things massively. But you're right with Singapore, Australia, various reasons there as well. And the biggest one actually is that their pension funds invest domestically in their own country. In the UK, our pension funds have an allocation to UK equities of about 2%. Australia's is 40%. So we don't even have our own pension funds believing in our own companies here. It's really, really remarkable.
Talk to me about that property element, because you mentioned that's a key factor, and I believe you are a bit of a Georgist who was the first time that I was introduced in the podcast. It's actually my most played ever episode on audio anyway, with Rory Sutherland,
Right.
who's a bit of an advocate of pushing back on the UK's kind of fetish around property.
Yeah. So the problem with the property market stems from probably one dynamic, and it's illiquidity. When you've got something that's relatively illiquid, it means that capital can't really transmit around the economy. So if we think of what a mortgage is, effectively you've got asset and liability, right? On a bank's balance sheet, a fantastic thing for them to have on their balance sheet would be a loan to a business, because that business can go and employ people. That business can go and invest, innovate, all of these things. When that loan is effectively stuck in the ground, doesn't really do anything apart from raising the bid for someone else to go and buy that property, which also invokes more debt having to be taken out. You start to see where we're going with things like money supply and things like that. We have a very, very stagnant, I guess, asset class in mortgages because they don't actually do anything for the economy. And that's really my biggest issue. You've got a load of capital trapped on bank balance sheets, a load of people who are effectively servicing that balance sheet with wages. So wages are getting transmitted from the productive economy to the unproductive economy. If we look at the US, for instance, they've got 30-year, 15-year fixed mortgage rates. In the UK, it's maybe 1 to 5. And so any interest rate hits, it really ramps up people's, monthly costs.
We saw that, didn't we? A couple of years ago, where they changed radically, where people were used to the lows of sub 3%. I was locked in up until this January at just over 1%.
Yeah.
That's radically different to what was being churned out through mortgage brokers in the last couple of years.
The interesting thing with maths there as well is what people don't realize is that a 2% increase to a 4% increase is 100%. It's not 2%. It's 200 basis points. So it's actually 100% increase in your interest cost a month.
We spoke about this, had Sasha Janssen, the finance YouTuber, on the podcast, and we spoke about the NI increase to employers' NI of 3%. That's not it's a 3% increase from 12 to 15.
Yeah.
But that's not a 3% increase for the person paying it.
Yeah.
And so often when governments or the media present these facts, they don't actually present it in the way that they should do.
No, you have to remember what the media are. It's like when people say, why aren't people learning, or why aren't students learning personal finance at school? How do you expect a teacher who's maybe on 32 grand, who actually probably doesn't have their finances in check, to be able to teach younger people about personal finance, investing, things like that? It's the same with the media. A lot of these people are just journalists. They're not deeply thinking about these topics. And so they get confused with things like growth rate versus what a basis point increase is. So the growth rate, obviously, on the national insurance is, effectively what, 20 odd %, whereas the basis point increase is 300 basis points. Do you see what I mean? So it's completely different.
Yeah, I just wish we had more intelligent people in the jobs that we require them to be helping, whether that's teaching or whether that's economic reporting, because guys like yourself, Andrew Craig, other guys I've had on the show like Damien Talks Money, Pete Matthew, who really understand this stuff, speaking about it, would educate somebody far more than if they plug themselves into the likes of BBC News and Sky News, which is just nonsense.
Yeah, I think there's Sky News, they've got Ed Conway, who is absolutely fantastic. Ed Conway is excellent. He's probably one of my favorite people to listen to because he's very, very data focused. And also he provides the caveats and different arguments. But I think right at the top, the problem that we have is largely that politicians aren't paid enough. And many people say, oh my God, they're paid, too much for whatever they do. But that's because you're comparing the caliber now versus the caliber of someone who actually would go for that job if they were paid, say, 300 grand a year. People that are paid 300 grand a year tend to be in finance. They tend to be traders. They tend to be investment bankers. Whereas if you were to incentivize the smartest people to go into politics that actually understand deeply about this subject area, rather than the sycophants, narcissists, psychopaths, sociopaths, who actually are very, very brain dead. And we can take what's happening with Angela Rayner right now. She's got more kids than GCSEs. If we take Peter Kyle, who actually has a reading age of 8, and he is the science and technology minister. He's in the bottom 1% of the country for reading comprehension. You can start to see now possibly why we're in some of the messes we are. The Tory party are very different. They're just very boys club. They know what they're there for. They're there to glean stuff for themselves, right, after politics.
My biggest problem with the Conservative Party as well is they bought into the globalist agenda. Things like the net zero bullshit, things like the COVID scam, these things that I just disagreed fundamentally with. And when Boris got in 2019, he had a mandate to try and get Brexit done, and what Andrew Craig and I have spoken about before, try and aim for Britain being like the Singapore of Europe, with low tax, low regulation, and encouraging environment to be in high safety, please. But then so many of his policies completely flew in the face of all those.
Yeah.
These days, it feels like every brand is shouting about how supplements are the answer to everything and all your problems. Before you jump on the latest wellness trend, it's worth remembering the foundations and basics come first. Hydration, good nutrition, rest, movement are the real keys. When you do decide to supplement, however, what you choose really does matter. You know I'm a big fan of removing toxins and unnecessary things from your lifestyle, and I ensure that my supplements are free from additives, artificial flavors, and any unnecessary, dirty, toxic fillers. Personally, having seen many professional athletes and top performers utilize their products, I decided to give Pure Sport supplements a go. Their products are built on science-backed information, minimal ingredients, and they do exactly what they're meant to. Whether it's their best-selling ultra electrolytes to keep you hydrated and energized, their deep magnesium to support with quality sleep, or even their natural testosterone boosting Tonka Ali, I trust that what they make is developed to care for me and my body. Explore the full range of Pure Sport supplements at the link in the show notes, puresport.co, and use the code CAMBRO10 for 10% off.
I mean, the stupidest policy that we've had in the last 5 years was the migration policy. Boris Johnson said that he wanted to increase migration from certain nations to stop the wage price spiral, which is possibly the most stupid thing I've ever heard, because effectively he's recruited an underclass, a massive underclass of people from various different cultures that even people from those nations over the last 30 years would say, these people are abhorrent. If you look at Nigerian and Indian wages since 2020, they were all the way up here. Since then, they've completely declined. Now, what does that tell you about the immigration policy of people from those countries over those years? It tells you that they're basically bringing in people who aren't very productive.
Low skilled and low value.
Low skilled, low value, and possibly a net drain for the rest of their lives on the fiscal side of the economy, which then, puts more pressure on taxpayers and also government spending. So it's been a real problem. And at the moment, everyone's talking about asylum seekers. Fine, that's one issue. However, the bigger, longer term problem is the immigration over the last 4 or 5 years in terms of the economy. Now, I'm not taking a moralistic argument here. I'm literally just telling people, you look at the data, look at how wages of certain nationalities have changed, which will tell you what the competency of these immigrants is. And that's not a bad position to take, because we have to focus on the economy. If we want to make...
So-called phrase, it's the economy stupid. It is.
Yeah. At the end of the day, money is the signal that incentivizes people to do things. It incentivizes, whether you're going to invest in the UK. It incentivizes so many different things. And if we're seeing these bad outcomes, outcoming, if you like, people are going to neglect the UK overall. They're going to see it as a place that they don't want to be.
I agree entirely. People are all riled up about the illegal immigration because it's so in your face and it's so egregious and it's so outrageous.
Mm-hmm.
But what the UK has done post-Brexit, when it had the chance to be much more strict in its immigration for the better, has completely flown in the face of what the wishes of the population were and for what the outcomes of the population will be from an economic perspective. Because when you flood the country with low-wage migrants, you skew the GDP stats in your favour to some extent, but you fuck over the average entry-level worker and even the median worker as well.
Well, you also fuck over the traditional immigrants. Even more so, because what they recognise is, and clearly what either the Home Office or people here don't recognise, is actually immigrants aren't a blanket, just how, British people aren't a blanket or a monolith. So those traditional immigrants can see who's coming in when they've worked hard for 30, 40 years, contributed massively. They can see what the underclass is doing, and they don't like them. Indians are some of the most racist people on the planet to their own people.
It's split between North and South.
Yeah, you've got a massive caste system there,
I spoke to an Indian gentleman in Dubai and he explained this to me. He was like, it's the equivalent of us importing, Dubai's talking about importing people from the local housing estate who have never worked in 2 generations. That's what you're importing into the UK now when you say we're importing Indians. And that shook me. And that's exactly what you're explaining there, because traditionally we would have imported high earning, non-EEA nations workers, and now we're importing low skilled, low wage migrants from those same countries.
Exactly. But the incentives are there for that to occur. Student visas. We've got a lot of healthcare visas over COVID, which I think largely was a big contributor to Nigerian wages dropping massively. The issue there being that you've got indefinite leave to remain after a couple of years. And so then you can bring dependents and things
family
like that.
dependents. And dependents is the key term, because they will be dependents on the state, because these individuals will not earn enough through a PAYE job to have a house, have a family, go to school, pay for those children. And they are also demographically breeding more than the native population, which again comes with its own challenges for what people are talking about when it comes to multiculturalism. Yeah,
I guess, the kids of these people, if they grow up young enough in the UK, possibly we could argue that, everyone initially is a dependent, usually until the age of 18, purely because they go to school and they, don't work, even British people. However, the curves are different. So the average wage migrant worker tends to have a positive contribution. But this is the interesting thing. When you compare the low wage migrant worker, they are never a net fiscal contributor. And this is where the divergence occurred in 2020. Before then, absolutely no issues. Since then, because 1 million plus have come, most are going to be low wage workers, because that was the designation to stop the wage price spiral. Boris Johnson said it himself.
Why do you think he cared about that?
Inflation is possibly one of the most geopolitically harmful things that can occur, because if people see their living costs going up when they don't really understand the economy, people still say corporations are greedy. Well, okay, but corporations have always been greedy. That's the point of a corporation. They try and profit maximize. Were they less greedy last year? Are they going to be, less greedy next year? Why are they more greedy now? So that's not inflation. Inflation is multivariate, and I think it's this desire to really not upset people through the cost of living that it was really top of mind for Boris, I think, but he went about it completely the wrong way, completely the wrong way, because the effects of what he's done now are going to last for decades, probably.
Yeah, the stats from that period, 4.5 million people came between 2021 and 2024, and they primarily came from Nigeria, India, China. And now 1 in every 25 people living in the UK came during that period.
I know.
So no wonder people are looking around their towns and cities and feeling it doesn't feel the same as it did before on a cultural level. But then what you're coming to the party with is the economic impact of that.
Exactly.
And I think some of these arguments get shouted down because they use the racist term, the bigot term. But you're coming at it from a completely logical discussion.
It's
and you're also speaking about people who are from the same heritage, who came here and contributed, and saying, brilliant, it's great to have you. Thank you for contributing to society. Thank you for assimilating. But then you have this next generation or next flush of people coming through that are just not in the same category.
Exactly. And, the only way that you can actually attack this argument is from a data perspective, because, there is no other thing other than data. Data is the most important thing ever. Because the second you start getting into anecdotal arguments is the second that it's down to perception and not actually understanding the effects and outcomes, second and third order effects. Now, Boris didn't understand second and third order effects clearly. Most of the British public doesn't understand second and third order effects. As a trader, you have to understand second and third order
That
effects.
background helps.
Exactly. And, again, I look at my own biases and I see, as a trader, I probably see things maybe a little bit too blinkered, whereas maybe I should be a little bit more open to the perception and feeling. But then I think, when I have certain discussions with people, I think, no, actually, you're the blinkered one.
Rational brain versus emotional brain.
Exactly.
Logical versus emotional.
And of course, there has to be, some compassion. I can understand to a certain extent, but it's like an elastic band. When it gets stretched too much, it's going to flip back, right? There's only so much compassion, I think, you can tolerate as an individual and as a population. And I think clearly from what's going on now, kind of that elastic band has been stretched very, very far.
I can feel the tension in the UK. I think we all can.
Yeah. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I can understand it, but I don't like the feeling.
It's a negative energy.
Nice. Yeah, it's really negative.
I create this podcast, and I have done for 5 years, and I've put every penny from sponsorship back into producing it and pushing it forward rather than trying to take some sort of small salary out of it, because I believe it uplifts people. It gives them power to improve their brain, their body, their business, and their outcomes. That's the energy that I want to be out there. The energy that's out there just now is scarcity, aggression, animosity, negative. And without getting super spiritual, that energy is infectious and it lowers our frequency as well.
I mean, I like to say hello to people just when you're out for a walk or whatever, especially old people, elderly, doesn't matter who it is. And I've noticed with a lot of people now, they're almost surprised if you say hello. It's really, really weird.
I think it's a combination of things, safety, but also the phones.
Yeah.
People are so distracted.
Yeah.
And I say that as somebody that's, my screen time since going self-employed has been wild because I'm just constantly on WhatsApp, but it's just how it is.
It's ridiculous. I hate it. I mean, it's very, very useful having a computer in your pocket at all times to do so many different things. And then since they've obviously invented like cloud computing, you can do a million times more.
All your documents are there too.
Do you know what I mean? Like, how can you not
be productive?
How can you not be productive? Well, exactly, yeah. But then
it's never been easier to be productive, but it's never been easier to be distracted too.
Yeah, it's good phrase that. Yeah, I mean TikTok, Jesus Christ.
At least you're creating on there, which I think helps.
Do you know what? That is very, very true. I think if you're just scrolling TikTok as like an anonymous account and you're just looking at stuff and throwing out little,
barbs.
Yeah, throwing out little comments just to be a negative. Can we swear on this?
Yeah, of course you can.
Cunt. I think that's pathetic. So I always think just put something out. Don't just sit there and just be passive. Like, talk about stuff. It's the best thing to do, because then you just get more opinions out there. Whether your opinion's good or not, it doesn't really matter. It's an opinion, right?
Pushback, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you talk about second and third order consequence effects of policy decisions, I think, as you say, most people don't have a good understanding of that. You do, with your background as a trader. It's inherent in your lifestyle and how you conduct yourself. You spoke about the pensions aspect. The UK has pulled something like 372 billion out of the pension funds since 2006. So when you do that, British companies suffer, the British population suffer. So while we're talking about immigration decisions from 2020 to 2024, I mean, I would argue some of the immigration decisions under Blair were pretty questionable as well. But political decisions and policy economic decisions from 2006 around pensions are having a second and third order consequence now on British equities, companies, and our ability to be a productive society.
Yeah, well, one of the biggest things is that, so defined benefit pensions, they ended up basically being closed to new entrants, which is a good thing, actually. The issue there, though...
Do you not find the whole idea of that just utterly absurd?
Oh, it is. It's completely absurd.
I had a friend at school, his dad retired as a fireman on like 60 grand a year at 50. And I was like, I really like the fire service. I really like the military, for example, as well. Like, I'm very patriotic about the UK. Like, previously would have been considered conservative. Definitely not now with the current party. But I was like, how on earth does somebody warrant living until their dying day being paid a full salary from what they were getting paid before?
More leads, more meetings, more quotes, more proposals, and closing a higher percentage of those. That's exactly what it's time to unlock with my sales masterclass. I've distilled down over 15 years of sales experience across B2B and B2C into some actionable lessons which you can benefit from. Clients that I've worked with one-to-one over the last 6 to 18 months have had incredible results, and it's now time for me to share with you an easier way to work with me rather than on a one-to-one basis. To get involved, hit the link in the show notes or under this description wherever you're watching this to join today's waiting list, and there's even some free goodies in there for you while you wait for the course to go live.
This is a bit of a side note, but I'm supposed to be going to Post Malone on Monday.
Okay.
But there's a tube strike, right? And someone messaged my missus because she posted a story on Instagram. He's a tube driver, and he was saying, yeah, we need to work less and be paid more. That's why we're striking. So I went on to Perplexity, and I looked at the salary of a tube driver versus the ease of the job. And Perplexity came back and said, the ease of job versus salary for a TfL train driver is probably one of the easiest in the world. They get paid 69k to 75k and have to work 35 hours a week on a 3.5 day shift. Why do they keep shutting the tubes down? 75k for sitting on your ass and pressing some buttons. Okay, sometimes there's some mental scarring from a suicide, but how often does that happen? There can be mental scarring from a car crash that you see. Do you know what I mean? I'm not compensated for seeing a car crash. But, I think, the defined benefit stuff is just insane, but I'm glad it's closed. The issue now, though, is currently we know that gilt yields are rallying quite heavily. Now, traditionally, what these defined benefit pension schemes would have done is bought gilts. Now that they're closing, that flow is going down, and it's going to continue to go down until about 2060. So one of the aspects here is that yields are going higher because the defined benefit pension funds are no longer participating in the gilt market as much, which is going to cause the Bank of England, I think, to have to step in and do what Japan did and do yield curve control, which is basically buying up a certain part of the yield curve to maintain the shape of it in a certain way, maybe to keep longer term interest rates lower, which you could argue in a very simplistic way is just quantitative easing again. But it's going to be much, much longer term and much more entrenched into the monetary policy of the UK.
There's a difference between monetary policy and fiscal policy as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
Which is commonly misunderstood. How would you explain that?
Fiscal policy is what the government takes in minus what they spend, and then monetary policy is basically interest rates.
All those levers they get to pull on.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's helpful to define our terms, because when you consider, we're going to talk about second and third order consequences of some other policies as well, in particular the VAT increase on private schools for Scotland, but what we'd call public schools in England. When you have these understandings of the different levers that government can pull when it comes to fiscal policy or comes to monetary policy, you understand why people like yourself and Andrew or whoever I also speak to on the show has been critical of politicians from both sides of the aisle, both Conservative and Labour, because they fundamentally don't seem to understand what they're doing when they have these decisions.
I think it comes down to the public as well, though. So the US has a reading age of, I think, 10. The UK probably is around the same. So if you extrapolate that out to what the general public are going to understand and what the aims of politicians are, really their goal is to try and edge those swing voters towards their position. And if you think of a bell curve, right, you're not going to go too crazy on outliers in terms of radical policy if your goal is to basically become elected. So what they're doing is just appealing to the public. And they think the public's stupid as well. And to a certain extent, I think the public are a little bit on certain issues because, again, it's very difficult, honestly, to think of those second and third order effects. These are things that, I think about all day in what I do. So I can understand. And again, that compassion, empathy thing can come in. However, my view is that incentivizing different thoughts is the way to go about things. Singapore, for instance, they pay their politicians about 500,000 Singaporean dollars a year. And also they have GDP targets to hit, which then provides them a bonus. It's like working at an investment bank. It's fantastic.
Who knew that incentivizing good performance would help people, David?
Why do we think Tony Blair's become so rich afterwards? Because he probably wasn't paid enough during politics. And so he, wangled his way into whatever massive supranational organizations there were.
He was destined for that as well.
Oh, he's great at it.
Yeah.
Do you know the thing with Tony
I think
Blair?
he's the devil, though, because he's pushing this digital ID stuff. That's one of his pet projects.
He's very, very smart. So his kids went to my school, and Cherie was I think she was either the treasurer or
bursar or
some big, bursar or treasurer or like some big sponsor of the school. I remember during 7/7, Catherine Blair, I'm pretty sure she was escorted out when everyone had to wait in the school grounds, for ages. There was a big cavalcade that came and got her out. But, he's a very, very smart man. He's played his game very well on his terms, of course, not necessarily for the benefit of anyone else. Look, at the end of the day, I don't like him, especially over the Iraq War and the Middle East. But he's played his game and he's done very, very well at it. And, he's probably fucked up a lot for a lot of people. But from a sheer competency perspective, he's very competent.
Versus what we've got now, yeah. I agree with the increasing the salaries for the MPs and for the political class, because if you expected somebody to run a massive company as Prime Minister, they wouldn't be paid 180k or whatever it is.
It's fuck all.
I mean, it's ludicrous. Like
there are some council chiefs paid more than the Prime Minister.
I think we've got too many layers of government anyway. Like we've got a Scottish Parliament with 129, and most of them are idiots.
Yeah,
because there's too much government. And then we've got council elections, and then we had the European Parliament. Don't get me started on. I was pro Brexit, but how we've enforced Brexit is not in line with my expectations.
I wouldn't have voted now if I'd have known that they wouldn't have been able to enforce it properly.
I would have still voted because we would have got railroaded into the euro at some point, but we definitely did not get what we were sold or promised, because the civil servant who are unelected and also actually quite highly paid, didn't have the will to do what we wanted. In the same way, I often joke that if the UK had a referendum on capital punishment, I think it would pass. I think people would vote in favour of it. An eye for an eye, or like some of the demonic crimes that people commit, I think they should potentially consider being
like Singapore
removed from this world. Yeah, me and you will just move to Singapore. We'll talk more about Portugal as we go, right? But Singapore sounds good. I think it would pass, but the civil servants in the government, the kind of woke, institutionalized leftist people who just think they're so much better than the population, would not let it happen in the way that you intended. They'd let it through, but there would be like all these caveats that would let people out of it.
They're wets. That's the best term for them. They're wets.
Thatcher had it right, didn't she?
If you were to approach them in the street and say these things, they would fucking shit themselves. However, in their anonymity, in
the blob, the bureaucracy, mate.
Yeah, exactly. The other issue at the moment, obviously, is the judiciary. The judiciary seems to be a certain couple of law chambers that are basically 70s style hippies who are now trying to enforce certain...
I wouldn't even give them the credibility of calling them hippies. I would
I don't know what they
say,
are. Communist
yeah,
weirdos.
yeah, communist weirdos. And there's an idea from a socialist called Gramsci of the long march through the institutions, which was to instill in places of power the communists throughout institutions, and it would take a long march to get them there. And I think we are now there, where many of the universities are ideologically captured. Many of the institutions like the government, the judiciary are ideologically captured, and they're able to pull the strings and block the will of the people. I mean, the Epping Hotel is probably what you're front in mind, isn't it?
Well, actually, no. I think
Something
the
else?
Chagos Islands is the biggest thing.
Okay, talk to me about that.
So, if you just want to put a headline up there, Keir Starmer paid Mauritius £36 billion over, a certain amount of years to give away islands that we own that also had a military base on them. What the fuck? Why? Why are you paying a country £36 billion for that? And also giving away. Normally, in a transaction, you would pay 36 billion for the islands. Why are you paying to fucking give it away? Philippe Sands was Mauritius's lawyer. He actually got citizenship in Mauritius during COVID. And he is Keir Starmer's best mate. They worked at the same chambers together. And Lord Hermer as well, who is the he's a lord. I can't remember what his specific role is, but he is naturally advising on all of these legal matters as well. And they're all
Connected
together. Yeah.
So is Lord Ali, but that's under injunction. We won't speak about that.
Philippe Sands said one of the best things, and I'm paraphrasing here, it's not exactly it, but he basically said that embarrassing the UK is like top on his agenda. It's in an interview, literally in an interview. And these are the people that we have to contend with that are connected to the government. And this isn't a conspiracy. You can see the interview and you can see everything that they're, talking about. And it's just bizarre to me that these things happen. Now, the Tories, actually, it's interesting about the Tories. So there's a fella called Dougie Smith, who, by the way, is a massive voyeur. He started sex parties. Now, he is head of the Tory party, effectively. But he's like a SPAD, a special advisor.
Yep.
He selects basically who's in the cabinet, but also I've heard he's a massive sociopath and just loves to just meddle and be a puppet master. He got his own wife, Munira Mirza, sacked to cause the downfall of Boris. His own wife.
So he was pulling the strings.
Yeah, he's pulling the strings. Very, very smart man. But one of these shadowy people behind the scenes in these places.
That's the problem with UK politics, because it's not that well paid. It attracts the sociopaths that you're talking about, because their driver isn't money, their driver is power.
Yeah.
And that's so dangerous for the trajectory of the UK.
It's far better to have a drive for money than power. I'm telling you. Do you know why? Because if you take it from a trading perspective, there are so many traders that I know that could make a shit ton of money and then go and do probably quite bad things. Instead, they just want to stay behind the scenes and just go and buy, houses and Lambos and stuff like that, but not even show them off online and things like that, But there are many of them that are making so much cash, but they live for the game. They literally live for the game. They don't live for power and trying to influence and do all this. Whereas these politicians, I feel like they genuinely love clinging on to power.
There's a lot of ideologues in this government as well, probably less so in the Conservative Party. They typically tend to be more practical, but Starmer's just appointed a high tax fanatic, Manoush Shafiq, I think her name is. Or his, he or she, I'm not sure.
She was a professor in the US.
But her quote sends chills down your spine. I think you shared this on X. The idea that you are successful because you are smart and hardworking is pernicious and wrong. And she wants to tax the life out of anyone that's been successful.
Do you know what the funny thing is, though? I agree with her, but for the wrong reason.
Okay, tell me.
I agree with her because actually, and now it's probably connected to being smart, but risk-taking is the reason why people are successful or wealthy. Is what her definition of success is wealthier. But risk-taking is that. Now, you don't actually have to be that smart to be good at risk-taking. There's lots of brokers and traders that I know that literally have 2 GCSEs and are worth maybe 7-8 mil. That's how much they might pull in a year. But they understand the element of risk. And I don't think risk is, or risk-taking ability is actually largely genetic and then maybe less so taught in terms of, okay, how do you actually identify what a good risk looks like? But the ability to take risk is definitely genetic. And I think it comes down to being able to have yourself in the right place at the right time. But that's not luck either. that is being able to consistently spot when to have yourself in the right place at the right
I
time.
talk a lot about this in the podcast. By stacking the deck in your favor and doing the right things, you increase your surface area of luck.
Yeah.
So the chances that you can be considered lucky. So I recently went self-employed after a long time of consideration, but then I was forced because the business that I worked for was badly mismanaged by two PE houses and it went pop.
Right.
But throughout that time, I'd been building a brand through Instagram, LinkedIn, the podcast for 5 years. Good audience on that. Everyone knew on it that I was good at sales. Everyone knew that I was a good communicator. So sales coaching and consulting was the vehicle that I chose to jump in on.
Yeah.
I'm actually quite risk adverse, but I took the risk to put myself out there in the internet. I took the risk to do a sales job, which can be a pretty punishing environment. And then I took the risk to go all in on a limited company that I've started to do this.
Yeah.
But throughout that time, I was stacking the deck in my favor by looking after my brain, my body, my business, and my skill set to be able to go in and do that. So I think it's interesting. Like there's no luck about it if you just really put yourself in that position over and over again and give yourself the best chance.
Exactly. Just doing things a little bit different to what your normal sort of pattern would be, which I guess you could say getting outside your comfort zone a little bit.
I think that's a good way to look at it.
You know, there's one thing that I did the other day, which was I just spoke non-stop on LinkedIn for 10 minutes on the UK economy. And I invited people to come and do it themselves. Loads of people liked it. Do you reckon anyone actually did it? No. But it's like, you know, not to speak on the UK economy, just anything that they want to speak
Yeah, some
on.
of you, I think you specifically said speak about something you're passionate about.
Yeah. And like no one did it. And I'm like, why not? It's 10 minutes out of your life and literally it could change how you think about presenting yourself. I said the other day as well that, you know, just speaking into your phone camera and putting stuff online is probably one of the best positive expected value activities you can do, because you're breaking down something that you don't usually do, which will then give you confidence to go and do stuff that you don't usually do, you know, generally. Like I'm doing a fitness photo shoot in mid-October. It's cringe as fuck. But the reason I'm doing it is because I don't want to do it again. And it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable getting super lean.
I've done 2 now, and they're great challenges for your mind and your body. And you lock in so much in that area of your life, it really helps your business and your career as well.
Exactly.
And when you manage all those different variables, like your training, your sleep, your nutrition, your steps, and your output, best believe that actually has a domino effect into other areas. I've got an episode with 2 friends that I do a regular roundtable with, and we say that fitness is the self-development gateway drug.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think because you know, generally you're not going to be drinking alcohol if you're focused on going to the gym 4 times a week. If you're focused on, okay, what does my breakfast look like?
If you got 15,000 steps a day to try and get the fat off, like
yeah, exactly. If you're on performance enhancers, you probably can't let your blood pressure go up too much, so you're not going to go and do a couple of lines of coke and then you know go out for 10 pints. You know,
do you remember the guy? Do you remember Z's from back in the day? The Australian guy.
Yeah.
He was obviously running pretty heavy steroids, and then clearly he was partying at festivals and raves, and then his heart went pop in a sauna.
It's so bad. Like it's fine if you do your bloods every 3-4 months, but you know a lot of people don't, like these Instagram influencers, because they just get high on the follower count and stuff like that. I think they're invincible. But you do have to, even if you're running low doses, it's you know right to do it. I mean, I take tests, Primo, some GH. What else have I done? Anavar.
How transformative has it been for you? I've heard you speak before. It's been really good for your mental health.
I had a super low test after I didn't have the child, but my missus had the child, and then there's a reaction in dads that, you know, for a couple of months afterwards, your test actually goes down, so you kind of become a little bit more nurturing. But with that, with low test, your estrogen goes up. And so what can happen is you actually get anxiety. You get depression. Like I went on to sertraline for a month because I was like, why the fuck am I feeling like this? Nothing's that bad, but I just feel like shit.
Chemically, you were compromised.
Yeah. But the thing is that it wasn't actually like depression because the sertraline didn't do anything. And then because I was searching for stuff on Google, Instagram, whatever, I got hit with TRT symptoms and an advert from Optimail. So I reached out to them, went and got a finger prick test. It was below their sub threshold, which meant that I could go get the intravenous one, see what my whole blood panel looked like, and then get started on TRT. And it was the biggest change ever, literally within like 3 weeks. It was just completely different. completely different. Your confidence goes up straight away again. You're not tired. You're not feeling the anxiety that I was having. I was having panic attacks and that kind of thing. It was really, really awful. We were going through a really hard period with an investor that defrauded us as well.
I've heard you speak about this. That must have
Yeah.
been a really challenging period.
Yeah. So all that combined with that, it was just awful. But yeah, he for 4 years he approached me on Twitter. We were chatting for about 2 years before then, just about football, interacting on the timeline, whatever. And then he said he was selling his business to Caesars Casino. And he wanted to invest in some startups, that kind of thing. He's going to sell it for an absolute shitload. This went on, back and forward over COVID.
And your business, Macrodesiac, at the time, what was that doing?
That was macroeconomic research.
Okay.
So that's where most people actually know me from, because that was so successful.
Yeah, you had a big Twitter page linked to it as well.
Yeah. And it was down to, like he was saying, you know what US lawyers are like, they just take ages with this stuff. And he was showing email trails from Caesars, which was all fake, like 40 email threads and stuff like this. Got to completion apparently in August 2023. And he was like, yeah, now we just got to get the money sent over and then we're good to go. Go 6-7 months later, it was, Coots won't let me open up an account because I've got a black mark against me because someone sent me money from Panama. The thing is, though, all of this sounds like true. He'd sent fake email threads again from Coots, the director of private investments had apparently emailed him, showed him all the payments. It's honestly, this isn't even half of it. It's literally not even half of it, though. It like, there are things that I don't even remember now, but I did a video on it for like 10 minutes showing all the evidence. Anyway, it came to June or July of last year. And he said, because his business was in gambling, he said, if I don't get 60K by 3 days' time, they're going to remove my gambling license and nothing can actually go through. Me thinking, yeah, that kind of makes sense, because obviously in finance you have to have money with the regulator. I thought it was the same with gambling. So I sent him 15 grand. 5 weeks later, nothing, excuse after excuse. So then I realized it was all a con, and he'd done it to 6 other people. The worst thing, though, the police don't want to do anything. Even
not for financial crime like that, do they?
Well,
afraid of it.
I went to Action Fraud, and the banks didn't want to do anything either. They said, oh, this is a civil matter. So the banks didn't even want to touch it, even though he'd forged bank documents, and I showed them the bank documents. They didn't want to do anything. So, Chase, Barclays, I guess NatWest and Coots, if you're watching, maybe you need to watch your compliance and actually your fraud. So what am I to think then about the integrity of police? It really, really affected me. It's only probably the last, I would say, 5 months when I'm like, I have to put that behind me now.
I think because of the growth of Fink and how successful you clearly proven yourself to be, you can leave that chapter behind. One of the considerations for listeners, and I always try and ask the obvious question, they're maybe shouting down their AirPods and like, ask David this, is when you're being strung along by a potential investor, why is that such a problem?
Because you put off everything. So I'll give you an example. So one thing that we were planning to do was have our original base, okay, as champions. So what we did was we moved maybe, it must be like 300 people who were paying monthly onto like a lifetime, because we were going to say, all right, when this money comes through, we will then have you guys as like the people that are consistently going to shout about us from the very, very start. You know how good we are. We've educated you to such an extent that you've been with us for
and
3 years.
Their success with trading has been this.
Exactly. Or even just understanding the economy markets, it was very macro based. And we'd have very big ideas, like getting long Rolls Royce in 2020, for instance, was one of our big ideas. We spotted the Evergrande collapse before anyone else in March 2021, I think it was. So we have very, very big and successful ideas. But the problem there is that once you move people onto lifetime, it's then very difficult to get any recurring revenue out of them going forward. So being strung along like that basically fucked
cash flow.
our whole process. We managed, we did all right. And, I was still trading actively at the time as well. So was able to basically do it. Now I just trade in a SIP and ISA because I'm very passive. But I think that was the biggest thing. And also it just felt like a massive amount of time wasted. It felt like a huge amount of time wasted. But do you know what I've had to do is flip it and think that was the best 15 grand that I've spent, because I could still be sitting here today being strung along. That's how good a manipulator he was. And number two, I'm probably not going to be fucked over like that again, especially say I've got more responsibility in the future. Say I've got, I rent my house. So say I've got a mortgage or whatever, which I probably will never ever have because I can't be bothered, or I'll just buy it cash maybe. Or, I've got another child, or, these other responsibilities that you tend to get when you're hitting 40 maybe. Maybe there's health issues that happen, So I'm happy those mistakes or those things have happened when I was, 30-ish, 29, 30, rather than
further down the line when
Yeah.
there was even more at stake.
exactly.
No, I understand that. You're joining the UK Exodus, and I think Portugal's the plan, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Cousin moved there 5 years ago from LA. It's a beautiful place. I never realized how lush Portugal was in terms of like greenery and stuff like that until I actually went. And I think, everyone talks about tax and all of this. Lifestyle matters way, way more. I'm tired of London. I think I'd love London if I came to visit for 2-3 days. I just don't love living here anymore. I'm not single anymore. I've got a fiance and a 5-year-old. And those two matter so much more than me going out and experiencing Shoreditch or the next, best bar or club or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, that doesn't matter to me anymore. For those things, it's fantastic. If you're a young single person, it's great. Even if you're only on, say, 30 or grand a year, you can still have fun. When you're my age, which is 32, I'm not that old, but I guess
You have a level of responsibility, though.
Exactly. Responsibility. I don't drink when I'm in the UK. Sometimes I'll have drinks now when I'm on holiday. And that's it. So I don't go out and do anything. So what I'd rather is be able to live in Portugal for maybe 60% less of the cost, be around my cousin who's also got a 5-year-old, have a nice big house for, our house here in Wimbledon's massive anyway, but have a nice bigger house for maybe 25% off what we're playing now, and just have a much more peaceful life. And yes, there's going to be pitfalls because there's not everything is glitters when you go somewhere. There's trade-offs with absolutely everything that you do. So I'm probably going to experience a different pace of how people do things. But even here, the pace is fucking shit with how things are done, quite frankly.
Yeah, you really noticed that. One of my guests when I did my last Dubai tour is Callum White, who runs a real estate firm in Dubai, and he says property in the UK, the estate agents are fucking useless because they're so slow.
Yeah.
Everything in Dubai happens boom, 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 all WhatsApp.
Mhm.
Boom. And if you don't move like that, you don't get a deal.
Yeah.
Whereas, like you say, I think London's fast paced in some ways in terms of because the travel is just so intense. Like getting to and from places, like you find a parking space near London Bridge today,
impossible.
fucking nightmare, right? Me going from Clapham to Hackney the last time I did like a 5-block of podcast in a day, I was fucked, mate. I'd been on a tube that I was getting rattled around on that I had to push to get onto. My energy levels were gone. So the pace is funny in some regards, but then the pace of actually getting stuff over the line isn't where it should be.
No, exactly. That tends to be what I find as well. Even, we're trying to change an email address for my daughter at the moment at her school, just so me and my missus are on it. Do you know how difficult it is? Just like you get a message back saying, "Oh, GDPR, we can't let you know what email." She's my fucking daughter. This is my fiance. What do you mean you can't tell me? I've given you it at some point. What is wrong with you? Do you know what I mean? Just stupid shit like that. It just pisses me off. It's like, use your common sense. You can see I'm emailing from an email address that's registered on her profile. Fucking tell me it. But just dumb stuff like that. Like, people's brains don't function properly or do anything practically.
Yeah.
It's all just, this is the code.
What are some of the other push factors from the UK that's forcing you to leave?
Honestly,
do you feel forced to leave?
Look, if I could live in the Cotswolds which I probably could do, but not have to, function with the whole British tax system, looking at the negativity all the time, focusing on, I don't know. Do you know what? I want to go somewhere where I can't even speak the language for a year and just turn all that off.
Okay.
That's
That's a more positive driver, because for me, for the UK, the tax situation's dreadful. When I was PAYE, it was absurd. The first time I hit 100k, which is such a first world problem to grumble about, but like I couldn't believe I was paying basically like 62% tax on everything between 100 and 125 grand. I was like, that's theft. I already disagree with anything above 50%, but that's bad enough. The safety situation is a real problem. I won't wear my watch in London. I'm a bit more on edge. I don't think it's only London. I think there's other parts of the UK. I don't know if you've ever got off the train at Birmingham New Street, but
I have never been to Birmingham, and I've never gotten
Don't go, mate.
any kind of
It's finished, mate.
incentive
It's
to go
literally
there.
finished.
Well, they're striking again, the bin people.
There's also a Muslim cabal there that's running the bin element as well.
Sorry, they got
What's wrong
one.
with
They got one across the whole civil service.
Really?
Muslim network.
that? Frightening, man. So safety, tax, and then you've got stuff like weather. So there's a lot going on that's pushing us away. But I think you speaking a bit more positively about what you're going towards, I'm a fan of that.
Yeah, look, I think it's it's a place where look, it's beautiful. Like, you could go to the little villages and stuff like that. People are genuinely friendly, even if you don't speak any Portuguese. You're going to places where they've still got a deep, deep history. There's a place called Obidos, which is a real medieval town. You go all the way up these like medieval streets, and then you've got a castle at the top. So culturally, it's very, very much like England. Catholic, which is, it retains that sort of sense of tradition quite a lot, which I quite like.
It's not watered down its culture, which we have.
Yeah. If you go to Lisbon, all the old buildings are still there. I don't like when you walk around London now and you see these blocks that are just like, it's like got this
called
weird...
BTR, it's called build to rent. Yeah.
It's fucking shit. They all look shit. Do you know what I mean? And for what?
It's new age, isn't it?
Yeah, but you can do so much. Like in certain places in the Netherlands and Belgium, they're building new stuff in like that traditional look, Georgian or Victorian or whatever. There's that place called Poundbury.
Okay.
Down in, I think it's Devon or Dorset. I think King Charles had something to do with it, but it's brand new, but it's all built in a traditional style. You could be walking into, an old town, in Harrogate or something. It looks beautiful. Why can't we do that? Why are we bound by stupid planning laws? It's insane to me.
Yeah, I agree.
Have you ever rubbed beef fat on your face? Sounds crazy, but that's what I've been doing since January with No Tox face balm. I've been really focused in the last few years on reducing the number of toxins that I take into my body, whether that's getting a filter for the water in my tap, whether that's removing things like heating plastics or drinking plastic bottles. The skin is the biggest organ in the body, so it was about time I considered what it was I was rubbing on my skin, and that includes things like moisturizers and other potentially harmful chemicals. Since January, I've been using No Tox face balm. My skin looks and feels the best it's ever felt, and you can benefit from that too. The link will be in the show notes for notoxskincare.co, and you can use Cambro for 15% off.
We've spoken a lot about the macro factors in the UK, and people listening to a podcast like this on a weekly basis, they want to have agency over their life. What would you encourage them to do to look after themselves and be in a better position?
Go along the risk curve. What I mean by that is, let's say crypto is all the way over here, meme coins or something, but cash ISA is here. Try and settle yourself somewhere here whereby you've got liquidity, which is very, very important. Liquidity premium is absolutely massive. It's why US stocks go up so much faster than UK stocks. Because you're able to transact basically right away. I could sell pretty much as many of my holdings right now as I wanted to and get the price that they're at. So that's a real, real key thing. So getting onto the risk curve, if you're not invested, is absolutely massive. And this isn't advice, but do look at US ETFs, which track the S&P 500 or NASDAQ as your first bet. You can direct debit from Vanguard every single month. £92 is the price on VUAG, which is the S&P 500 ETF. Buy a couple of those a month and watch in 2-3 years. You'll be laughing at how easy it is. And I think the biggest thing for most people as to also why they're not invested when we're looking at it from a psychological perspective is really just the anticipation. most nerves just come from the anticipation of doing something. When you've actually done it, you're like, oh, that was all right. You know, a skydive, you're shitting yourself once. You know, I've never done one, but you're shitting yourself when you're at that plane. You're about to maybe jump with someone strapped on your back, right? But when you're probably in the air, it's probably okay. So, you know, it's the same with investing. I think people are just afraid to make that step, and there's a loss aversion element too, when in actual fact, there is a bigger risk of not being invested due to opportunity cost. You know, what is your cash doing otherwise? Oh, you can look at the nice numbers in your bank account.
It's being eroded by inflation.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's more important now than ever to be invested. And people say, you know, oh, why did US stocks rally over the last couple of years so hard? Well, it's because Americans realized that to beat inflation, they had to be invested in equities. And that's what it came down to. You know, equities are in fact an inflation busting asset class to be in.
Yeah,
even though interest rates
the
might
S&P
rise.
500 shows that.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and the number one thing that I say that I could tell parents especially to do is open up a junior ISA for your child. You can contribute 9K a year tax free. Obviously, it has to come from your net income. We can get onto pensions in a second. But by the time they're 18 and can have that, say they're, you know, 3 years old now, that's 15 years of stock market growth. They could have maybe 150 to 200 grand by the time they're 18. And that's probably being conservative, actually. And that's with a relatively limited contribution, you know, every single month.
Less than £1,000 a month, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, not everyone is going to have £1,000 to put into an ISA, especially for their kids, let alone themselves. However, contribute as much as possible for them, you know, 100 quid if you can do it. Birthday parties, rather than get a million presents, which you know they're going to open. I know this personally. This is what happens. They get a million presents, they open them. Oh yeah, fantastic. Never play with them again. Get people to just, you know, I don't know. You can't log into an ISA or send all the parents your ISA login for your kid, but maybe say to them, look, I'd much prefer if we could, you know, and it's a difficult conversation to have. Most people aren't going to do it. But if you can, maybe from grandparents or stuff like that, do it that way. It will be so much more beneficial than the shitty little toy, which you're going to buy anyway. You know, every time I go out with my daughter, she gets something. So she doesn't need more from other people.
You're so right.
Literally, she doesn't need more. So I think that's probably something that people can do is focus more on their kids' future from a financial perspective.
Move themselves along that risk curve. You mentioned pensions very quickly there.
Pensions, yeah. So you spoke about moving into the 100K band, 100K to 125K band. The reason why we see so many nice cars on the road these days is because people are probably earning maybe 124 grand, but they're getting absolutely smashed because they've got 2 kids. Their personal allowance decreases so much, and obviously
I think that's scandalous. One of the biggest things I would do if I was in power would be to increase the personal allowance. And if you go over 100, I certainly wouldn't take it off you.
Yeah, but people don't realise that they have been additionally taxed since 2021, because the tax bands haven't moved. So they don't need to actually raise income tax because they're already being taxed extra because of that. You know, it's absolutely diabolical. Sorry, my nose is really itchy today. So yeah, one of the reasons why we see so many nice cars on the road, I think, is because they're doing the car schemes at work. And so that car scheme comes off your gross salary. So it gets you below the 100K threshold, so you pay less tax. Same with salary sacrifice into pensions. That's why so many people are putting their money from their salary maybe up to 125K below, so they get below the threshold. But the problem with that is naturally that is reducing any consumption now, which is fine. But if you really want to target growth, you want consumption now.
Yeah, we want people to spend their money and have access to it to spend it on the things they want and stimulate the economy.
Exactly. Rather than wait until they're 50, say 55 in a sip, or, you know, maybe even 65 in some cases. You know, it's bizarre to me that they don't think of these things. But again, that's the second order effects.
They're not considering these things at all, David. But we certainly have today, and I'm sure the listeners have found it really refreshing to hear a lot of your takes, and I've certainly enjoyed a lot of them as well. If they want to continue the conversation with you, where should they head towards?
You can go to fink.money. We're actually getting a new website done right now. DB_Fink is my more toxic Twitter account. Fink_money is my markets focused one, and fink.tok is my TikTok. And also follow my Instagram, because I can't crack Instagram Reels. It's so hard, but that is
Your TikTok's growing like wildfire, and it's the similar stuff that's going across there.
Yeah, Instagram
not
Reels
working.
is so different. I don't know how to do it. I think I have to do more like baity content for there, but I'm going to test stuff out. But I think that is fink.money.
I'll put the links in the show notes.
Yeah,
David,
yeah.
thank you so much. We're definitely going to go around to it at some point. And listeners, thank you to you as always. I'll be back to speak to you again very, very soon.